Sasha was at her desk, staring at her laptop, pretending to work on the endless spreadsheets her boss loved but never read. Her phone buzzed next to her coffee mug, and she glanced at the screen. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but decided it might be a delivery or something important. She picked up. Hello? There was a pause on the line. Not the static silence of an empty call, but the weighty kind that felt alive, waiting. Then a voice spoke, calm and neutral. The house is unlocked. They're expecting you. Sorry, what? Sasha asked, frowning. I think you've got the wrong number. Another pause. The voice, unfazed, repeated itself. The house is unlocked. They're expecting you. And then the call ended. Sasha stared at her phone, unsettled but not overly so. People misdial all the time. Weird people even more often. She shrugged it off and returned to her work, but something about the voice stayed with her. It wasn't robotic, but it wasn't quite natural either, like it had been scrubbed of emotion. Her day continued uneventfully until she left the office and walked home in the fading light of dusk. The streets were quiet, her shortcut through the neighborhood unusually so. As she rounded the corner onto her block, she noticed something odd. A house halfway down the street, a gray, forgotten-looking thing with boarded windows, had its front door slightly ajar. Sasha stopped. It wasn't uncommon for the old place to look abandoned. In all the years she'd lived here, she'd never seen anyone go in or out. But now the door swung lazily, creaking in the evening breeze. The house is unlocked, the voice from the call echoed in her mind. She shook her head. It was a coincidence. That's all. Her legs felt rooted to the spot as she stared at the house. Against her better judgment, she took a step forward, and then another. The sidewalk was cracked, and the yard overgrown with weeds. As she approached the door, she saw faint scratch marks on the wood, as though something with claws had tried to get in or out. She hesitated at the threshold. The house exuded a strange energy, the kind that made her skin prickle and her stomach churn. Don't go in, she told herself. This is how every horror story starts. But the door creaked wider, almost inviting her. Sasha stepped inside. The air was heavy, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. The hallway stretched before her, dimly lit by a flickering bulb overhead. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper that seemed to ripple as though breathing. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat, but she pressed on, drawn by something she couldn't name. At the end of the hallway was a room, its doorway framing a faint, pulsing glow. Sasha's footsteps were slow and deliberate as she approached, each one echoing louder than the last. She peered into the room. It was empty, save for a single chair in the center. On the chair sat a phone. Not a modern smartphone, but an old rotary model, black and gleaming. The glow was coming from the phone, which hummed faintly, vibrating against the seat. Her first instinct was to turn and run, but her body betrayed her. She stepped into the room, drawn toward the chair as though on puppet strings. Her hand reached out, trembling, and the moment her fingers brushed the phone's cold surface, it rang. The sound was piercing, shrill, cutting through the silence like a knife. Sasha snatched her hand back, staring at the phone as it continued to ring. The urge to pick it up was overpowering, and before she knew it, the receiver was in her hand. She pressed it to her ear. No voice greeted her this time, only the sound of static, dense and alive. Then, through the static, came the faintest whisper, "Turn around." Every muscle in Sasha's body locked. She could feel the weight of something behind her, something vast and predatory. Her breath came in shallow gasps as the whisper repeated, louder now, "Turn around." "No," she choked out, her voice barely audible. The room grew colder, and the whisper became a growl. "Turn around." Her body moved against her will, her head twisting slowly, painfully, to face whatever loomed behind her. The room was empty. No shadows, no figures. But the air pulsed, alive with unseen movement. And then, the walls began to bleed. Dark, viscous liquid seeped from the wallpaper, pooling on the floor in slow, deliberate streams. The glow from the phone intensified, casting the room in harsh, flickering light. Sasha stumbled backward, the receiver still clutched in her hand. The growl became a roar, a cacophony of voices overlapping, each screaming a single, unintelligible word. "Stop!" Sasha screamed, dropping the phone. The moment it hit the floor, the sound ceased. The room was silent again, the light gone. The phone sat on the chair, inert, as though nothing had happened. Sasha didn't wait. She bolted from the house, her feet pounding against the floorboards and then the cracked pavement outside. She didn't stop running until she reached her apartment, slamming the door shut and locking it. For hours, she sat in her kitchen, shaking, trying to convince herself it was a dream. But when she finally calmed down and checked her phone, she saw a single new notification. A voicemail. Her hands trembled as she pressed play. The message was brief, just a few seconds of static, followed by a familiar voice. "The house is unlocked. They're expecting you." The Thompsons' house was the kind of place that looked perfect on the outside, but had just enough weird energy to make you think twice about stepping inside. The lawn was immaculate, the hedges perfectly trimmed, and the welcome mat looked like it had been placed by a feng shui consultant. But something about it screamed, "There are rules here you don't know yet." Claire Thompson met me at the door, her smile thin but polite. She looked like someone who balanced PDA meetings and Pilates classes with military precision. "Thank you so much for coming on short notice," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "We left dinner money on the counter. It's just pizza and breadsticks for the boys. Should be simple." "Sounds great," I said, giving her my best babysitter smile. I was determined to make this easy. Show up, feed the kids, watch them until bedtime, and get paid. No drama. The boys, Jamie and Tyler, were 8 and 10 and immediately tried to size me up. Jamie was all dimples and charm, a budding con artist in Spider-Man pajamas. Tyler, older and quieter, hung back, watching with the suspicion of someone who had seen too many babysitters come and go. "What's for dinner?" Jamie asked, bouncing on the couch. "Pizza," I said, to cheers from the living room. "It'll be here soon." When the doorbell rang, Jamie raced to answer it like his life depended on it. I paid the delivery guy, brought the boxes to the kitchen, and opened them to reveal a large cheese pizza and a box of breadsticks that smelled so good my stomach growled in betrayal. "2 slices each to start," I said, placing plates in front of the boys. They dug in with abandon, and after making sure they were settled, I grabbed a plate for myself. 2 slices and 1 breadstick. Babysitting etiquette 101. Don't eat more than your fair share. The boys talked non-stop through dinner, regaling me with tales of their school drama and Jamie's heroic feat of climbing the rope in gym class. When they were done, they bolted upstairs to play while I cleaned up the kitchen. It felt like a textbook babysitting gig, which should have been my first clue that something was about to go sideways. Bedtime came and went without much of a fight, and by 9:30, the house was silent. I sank onto the couch, scrolling through my phone and enjoying the rare peace of a successful evening. That's when I heard it, the faintest sound of footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting to see one of the boys, but the hallway was empty. Weird, I thought, brushing it off as house noises. But a few minutes later, I heard it again. Footsteps, followed by a faint creak, like someone opening a door. My heart skipped a beat. "Jamie? Tyler?" I called out softly, but there was no response. I stood and made my way down the hall, every creak of the floorboards amplifying the eerie silence. The boys' bedroom door was slightly ajar, and when I peeked inside, they were both sound asleep. Confused, I closed the door and turned back toward the kitchen. The pizza box was open. I was sure I'd closed it. Positive. But there it was, the lid flipped back and the breadsticks. I could swear there had been 3 left, but now there were only 2. My pulse quickened. Did one of the boys sneak down? "Nice night for a snack," a voice said suddenly, startling me so badly I nearly knocked over the box. I spun around, and there stood Claire, still in her evening dress, her eyes sharp and glittering like a predator's. She was holding a glass of wine, her posture as poised as a painting. "Mrs. Thompson," I said, my voice shaking just a little. "I didn't hear you come in." "We've been home for about 10 minutes, she said, her smile too perfect to be real. "Mark's upstairs checking on the boys." "Oh," I said, feeling a strange sense of unease. They've been great. Went to bed without a fuss. She stepped closer, her gaze flicking to the open pizza box. I see you helped yourself to dinner. Yes, I admitted, my cheeks flushing. Just 2 slices. I thought it was fine. There's still plenty left. Her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. Did we say you could eat our food? I stammered, completely caught off guard. I assumed most families don't mind. I was watching the boys and... We're not most families, she said, her voice smooth and icy. We expect professionalism. It was 2 slices of pizza, I said, trying to keep my tone even. I didn't mean to overstep. Oh, but you did, she said, taking a slow sip of her wine. We trust our babysitters to respect boundaries. Before I could respond, Mark appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Everything okay here? He asked. Claire glanced at him, then back at me. Fine. We're just having a little chat about expectations. I grabbed my bag, my skin prickling with a mix of embarrassment and anger. I think I'll head out now, I said, forcing a smile. Thanks for the opportunity. Neither of them tried to stop me as I left. The cool night air hit me like a slap, and I inhaled deeply, trying to shake the bizarre encounter. Later, as I recounted the story to my roommate, she burst out laughing. You were babysitting for vampires, she declared, half joking. Don't be ridiculous, I said, though the memory of Claire's unsettling smile lingered in my mind. Still, I couldn't resist adding, but if they were, at least they didn't drink my blood, just my dignity. The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. Lana, can you pick up the cake? My sister, Sophie, had asked in her usual breezy tone. I've got to set up for Mason's birthday party, and Mom's running late. It was a reasonable request. I was already on my way to the party, and what's one more errand? But what I didn't realize then was that my sister had stumbled upon a magic phrase. Lana will do it, and like a sorcerer discovering a new spell, she began using it constantly. Lana will handle the decorations. Lana can watch the kids for a couple of hours. Lana can drive Grandma to the doctor. At first, I convinced myself it was just a phase, Sophie needing extra help while she juggled work, her kids, and her eternally distracted husband. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into years, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person with boundaries and became the family's official unpaid assistant. The breaking point came last Thursday. Hey, Sophie said, calling me out of the blue. You're free on Saturday, right? I wasn't, but that had never stopped her before. Why? I asked cautiously. I need you to handle the petting zoo for Harper's birthday. You just have to make sure the llamas get set up in the yard and that the kids don't get too close to the chickens. Oh, and someone needs to feed the goats, but it's super easy. Sophie, I interrupted. I can't. There was a pause on the other end of the line, as if she couldn't process what I just said. What do you mean, you can't? I mean I'm busy, I said firmly. I've got plans this weekend. Sophie's voice took on that familiar tone of disbelief, like I just told her I was moonlighting as an astronaut. Plans? What kind of plans? Just plans, I said, unwilling to elaborate. The truth was, I'd booked a weekend at a quiet cabin 2 hours away. No phones, no errands, no screaming kids. Just me, a stack of books, and the sound of wind in the trees. Well, can't you reschedule? She asked. No, Sophie. I can't, I said, my tone sharper now. You're going to have to handle the llamas yourself. There was another pause, longer this time. Wow. Okay, she said, her voice flat. I didn't realize you were too busy for your own niece. The guilt hit me like a punch to the stomach, but I didn't back down. I'm not too busy for Harper. I just need some time for myself, Sophie. I've been helping you nonstop for years. Helping me? She snapped. You're her Aunt Lana. Family shows up. Yeah, well, this time I'm showing up for myself, I said, and hung up before she could argue further. The weekend at the cabin was everything I'd hoped it would be. I slept in, read 3 entire books, and watched the sunrise over the lake while sipping coffee. For the first time in years, I felt like I could actually breathe. But when I returned home Sunday evening, the fallout was waiting for me. Sophie had posted a series of passive-aggressive stories on Instagram. One showed a slightly disheveled petting zoo with the caption, "When you have to do it all by yourself." Another featured a picture of Harper blowing out her candles, accompanied by the words, "Thanks to everyone who showed up for my baby girl. Red heart." The group text wasn't any better. "Mom, I heard you missed Harper's party. Everything okay, Lana?" Cousin Gina, "Wow, no llama duty for you? Must be nice." Sophie, "Don't worry, I survived. But Harper did ask why Aunt Lana didn't come. I didn't know what to tell her." Pensive face. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before finally settling on, "Me, I'm fine. Just needed a break. Glad the party went well." The silence that followed was deafening. A few days later, I called Mom, hoping for some backup. She listened quietly as I vented about how Sophie took advantage of me, how I felt like the family's go-to problem solver, how exhausted I was. When I finally finished, Mom said, "Honey, I understand, but Sophie's got a lot on her plate, and you're so good at helping. She relies on you." "That's the problem," I said, frustration bubbling over. "Everyone relies on me, but no one asks if I'm okay with it. They just assume I'll do whatever needs to be done." "Maybe you should talk to Sophie," Mom suggested. "Why?" I asked bitterly. "So she can guilt-trip me into doing more? I'm tired, Mom. I don't want to be the reliable one anymore." Mom sighed, the kind of sigh that meant she didn't agree but didn't want to fight. "I just don't want you to drift apart from your family, Lana. It's important to show up for each other." That word again. Show up. As if showing up for myself didn't count. The next morning, Sophie called. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," she said. Her tone was cautious, almost nervous. "Hey," I replied, wary. "Look," she began. "I've been thinking about what you said, and I guess I didn't realize how much I was asking of you. You're right. You've done a lot for me." I blinked, stunned. "I wasn't trying to guilt you, Sophie. I just needed a break." "I know," she said quickly, "and I'm sorry. I'll try not to dump so much on you in the future." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that this truce wouldn't last long. So here I am, asking you all, AITA? The envelope appeared on my desk one morning without explanation. I was certain it hadn't been there the night before. I'd left the office late, the building empty except for the hum of fluorescent lights and my own dragging footsteps. Yet there it was, square and unassuming. My name handwritten across the front in ink that shimmered faintly, like oil on water. The office was already awake around me, a murmur of keyboards and coffee cups clinking. But this envelope made the world seem quieter. The paper was thicker than normal stationery, almost velvety. I turned it over carefully, feeling its weight, and found a wax seal pressed into the back, an intricate crest of crossed keys I didn't recognize. I should have ignored it, thrown it away, maybe, but instead, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of parchment. The message was brief. "You are invited to a one-time event. Bring only your wits. The location will find you when the time is right. Remember, the door only opens once." There was no signature, no return address. Just that cryptic, maddening note. For the next week, I couldn't shake the feeling that the letter was watching me. I tucked it into my desk drawer, then into my bag, and finally into the back of a book I'd never planned on reading, but its presence lingered like a shadow. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the crossed keys, the faint shimmer of the ink, and the words, "The door only opens once," echoed in my mind. Then, on Friday, I found the door. It wasn't in the office, or my apartment building, or anywhere logical. I was walking home after a particularly grueling day, the sky heavy with the threat of rain, when I passed an alley I didn't remember seeing before. It wasn't a charming, cobblestone kind of alley. It was narrow and grimy, the kind of place that smelled faintly of regret and something worse. But at the end of it, glowing faintly in the dim light, was a door. It was black, glossy, and unmarked, save for the crest of crossed keys carved into the wood. I stopped, my breath hitching. There was no knob, no visible lock, but as I stepped closer, the door seemed to hum faintly, as though it recognized me. My hand hovered over the wood. Then the letter's words came back to me. Bring only your wits, and I pushed. The doors swung open, revealing a room that shouldn't have existed. It was vast, impossibly so, the kind of space that made you feel small in a way the sky never could. The walls were lined with bookshelves that stretched endlessly upward, their spines glowing faintly in hues I couldn't name. The floor was a mosaic of shifting patterns, geometric shapes rearranging themselves as I stepped inside. At the center of the room was a table, and at the table sat a woman. She was dressed in something that shimmered between silver and green, a gown that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Her hair was the color of old gold, her eyes sharp and unsettlingly bright. In front of her, a single candle burned, its flame flickering in a way that didn't match the stillness of the air. "You made it," she said, her voice low and melodic. "Most don't." "Most?" I asked, my throat dry. "How many people get invited?" "Enough," she said cryptically, gesturing for me to sit. The chair across from her was old and ornate, its arms carved with symbols that seemed familiar in a way I couldn't place. I lowered myself into it cautiously, my fingers brushing the cool surface of the table. It was stone, veined with something that looked like molten gold. "You have questions," the woman said, leaning forward slightly. "They all do." My voice faltered. I had 1,000 questions, but none of them seemed right. "What is this place?" "A game," she said simply. "A choice. A test." "Of what?" Her lips curled into a smile that was equal parts warmth and warning. "Yourself." She reached under the table and pulled out a deck of cards, the backs intricately patterned with that same crest of crossed keys. She began to shuffle them, the movements fluid and hypnotic, the sound of the cards snapping together sharp in the silence. "I will deal you 3 cards," she explained. "Each one represents an offer. You may choose one, and only one. But remember, nothing comes without a cost. And if I choose wrong, there are no wrong choices, only consequences." She finished shuffling and laid the deck in front of me. "Cut it." My hands felt clumsy as I split the deck. She gathered the cards and dealt 3 onto the table, face down. "Turn them over," she said. The first card was dark and swirling, its image shifting as I looked at it. A door, a staircase, a chasm. Beneath it, a single word, power. The second card glowed faintly, a scene of golden fields and sunlight spilling over distant hills. Beneath it, peace. The third card was blank, its surface smooth and featureless. No image, no text, just an empty, waiting space. "What's the blank one?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Possibility," she said, her tone unreadable. "A future unwritten." I stared at the cards, my mind racing. Power, peace, possibility. Each word pulsed in my thoughts, each choice heavy with the weight of what it might mean. The woman said nothing, her bright eyes watching me with an intensity that made the air feel thinner. Finally, I reached out, my fingers hovering over the blank card. "This one," I said. Her smile deepened, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Satisfaction? Amusement? I couldn't tell. She placed her hand over mine, the contact startlingly warm. "Then write it." Before I could ask what she meant, the card began to glow, its surface shifting under my touch. And then the room disappeared. I was standing in the alley again, the rain starting to fall. The door was gone, the letter crumpled in my hand. But as I looked at the blank card now tucked into my pocket, I felt something new, an ember of light, a spark of something vast and untamed. Possibility. It started with a snow globe, specifically, her snow globe. My sister Lucy collected them when we were kids, tiny glass worlds filled with glittery flakes that never stopped falling. Each one came with a story. The one from the boardwalk when Dad won her a carnival game, the one from Paris that a pen pal mailed her, the one I gave her when she turned 16 with a little statue of a red cardinal inside because that was Mom's favorite bird. But Lucy's favorite was the one she got for her wedding. A custom piece with a miniature version of her and her husband, Andrew, standing in front of a little gazebo, smiling forever inside a crystal dome. She kept it on the mantle, the centerpiece of her collection. It was beautiful, sure, But to Lucy, it was sacred, untouchable, which is why it was such a gut punch when Andrew left. One day, he was just gone, packed his stuff, left a note on the kitchen counter, and disappeared from her life. She called me in tears that night, her voice shaking so hard I could barely make out the words. And when I came over the next morning to check on her, the snow globe was smashed on the kitchen floor, shards of glass and fake snow scattered everywhere. She swore it was an accident, that it had fallen while she was cleaning, but I knew better. Lucy doesn't make careless mistakes. After that, it was like she stopped existing. Sure, she went through the motions, work, groceries, the occasional awkward phone call, but she wasn't really there. She didn't cry much after that first night, but that almost made it worse. It was like she was frozen in time, just like the snow globes she used to love so much, and I couldn't stand it. So, I decided to fix the snow globe. It wasn't about Andrew. It wasn't even about the collection. It was about her. About showing her that not everything has to stay broken. That some things can be put back together, even if they aren't the same. I found a local artist who specialized in custom glasswork and convinced him to recreate the globe. But I made some changes. No Andrew this time, just Lucy, standing in the gazebo alone. She looked radiant in the tiny sculpture, like she owned the world. Instead of fake snow, I asked for tiny golden flakes that would swirl around her like sunlight. A new start. A reminder that she didn't need anyone else to shine. It took weeks to finish, and I spent those weeks obsessing over every detail. Was the gazebo the right shade of white? Did the gold flakes catch the light the way I imagined? Did the artist get Lucy's face just right? When I finally picked it up, it was perfect. I planned a whole little ceremony for the unveiling. Just me, Lucy, and a cup of hot cocoa each. I wrapped the globe carefully in tissue paper and brought it to her house, nervous but hopeful. When I handed her the package, she gave me a look. "What's this?" she asked, already sounding suspicious. "Just open it," I said, grinning. "Trust me." She unwrapped the globe slowly, her brow furrowing as she took it in. Her finger traced the glass, the golden flakes catching the light as they settled. For a moment, I thought I'd done it, that I'd given her something that might spark a little bit of joy. Then she looked up at me, her face blank. "Why would you do this?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "It's for you." I thought it might. "Remind me of my failure," she cut in, her voice sharp. "Remind me that the person who was supposed to love me forever walked out without a second thought?" "No, Lucy, that's not." "It's exactly that," she said, setting the globe down with a soft thunk. "Do you know what it's like to have a constant reminder of the worst day of your life? I don't need this. I don't want this." "Lucy, I was just trying to help," I said, feeling my chest tighten. "I thought." "You thought wrong," she snapped, her voice breaking just a little. "You don't get it. You can't just glue things back together and pretend they're okay. That's not how life works." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd spent weeks imagining how this moment would go. Her smiling, maybe crying happy tears, maybe even hugging me and saying thank you. But none of that happened. Instead, she pushed the globe back toward me like it was something dangerous. "Take it," she said quietly. "I don't want it." I stood there for a long moment, the globe sitting on the coffee table between us like a third person in the room. Part of me wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that she did need this. But the look in her eyes stopped me. I picked up the globe, wrapped it back in the tissue paper, and left. Now it's sitting on my dresser, a beautiful, glittering reminder of my failure. I keep wondering if I misread the situation completely. Was I selfish for thinking this would help? Was it unfair of me to try and give her something she wasn't ready for? Or was she just too caught up in her pain to see what I was really trying to do? It started as a joke, just a throwaway comment over coffee with a few friends. You know what would be hilarious? A murder mystery dinner where no one knows they're playing a part until they arrive. I'd said it half-jokingly, swirling my latte, but the idea stuck in my head like a catchy tune. By the time I got home that night, I'd already started making a list of characters and possible suspects. A month later, the Murder on the High Seas dinner party was born. The concept was simple. The guests would arrive thinking it was a normal evening, and only after their first drink would they receive their roles, complete with backstories and motives. I transformed my apartment into a creaky, fictional ship called the Mariner's Whisper, with dim lanterns, sea shanties playing in the background, and even a dry ice fog machine to simulate the misty deck. It was theatrical, ridiculous, and everything I wanted. The guest list was carefully curated. 12 people, all handpicked for their mix of personalities and flair for the dramatic. I spent weeks fine-tuning everything, scripting the clues, decorating the space, even creating evidence like blood-stained letters and a torn map. This wasn't just a party, it was a masterpiece. And then there was Ben. Ben was my childhood best friend, and on paper, he should have been an automatic invite. We'd been inseparable as kids, spending summers inventing elaborate games and building forts out of whatever we could scrounge up. But Ben had changed over the years. He'd grown, cynical. If there was a punchline, he'd twist it. If there was a vibe, he'd cut it. I'd stopped sharing creative projects with him because his first response was always, "That's dumb," followed by some half-smirk meant to soften the blow. I knew what would happen if I invited him. He'd roll his eyes at the costumes, make sarcastic comments about the fake clues, and crack jokes during the big reveal. He wouldn't mean to ruin it, but he would. And I couldn't let that happen. Not to something I'd poured so much heart into. So, I left him off the list. The night of the party was everything I dreamed of. The guests arrived in their assigned costumes, flouncy pirate blouses, glittering jewelry, and even one absurd monocle. The atmosphere was electric, with people diving into their roles, accusing each other of theft and deceit while sipping rum punch. Laughter filled the air as alliances formed and secrets unraveled. I was mid-scene, dramatically revealing a fake logbook that hinted at the murderer's identity when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it and froze. It was Ben. "Hey," the text read. "Saw pics of your pirate thing. Looks fun. Guess my invite got lost at sea?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't told anyone not to post about the party, and now, there it was, plastered across Instagram. Photos of people in pirate hats, laughing under string lights, holding fake daggers. Ben had seen it, and he wasn't stupid. I stepped into the hallway and called him. He answered on the first ring. "Hey," I started, trying to keep my tone light. "What's up?" "Not much," he said, his voice flat. "Just wondering why everyone else gets to play pirate while I'm sitting at home." I hesitated. "It's not like that. It's just a specific kind of thing. You don't even like this kind of stuff?" He laughed, sharp and humorless. "Wow, so you decided for me, huh? Nice." "Ben, come on," I said. "You know how you are at these things. You hate dressing up, and you're always making jokes about how cringe it is." "Yeah," he said, his voice cutting. "But that's just me. I don't ruin things. I'm not a monster." I tried to explain that it wasn't personal, that I just wanted to keep the mood intact. But the more I talked, the worse it sounded. "Not personal," he repeated. "It's me, Alex. We've been friends for 20 years, and you don't think I'd get how important this is to you? You didn't even give me a chance." He hung up before I could respond. I went back to the party, forcing myself to smile and rejoin the chaos. The final reveal went off without a hitch. The murderer was unmasked, fake tears were shed, and everyone toasted to the best party ever. But I couldn't shake the weight in my chest. The next day, I scrolled through the photos, reliving the night in snapshots. Everyone looked happy, like they'd just stepped out of a movie. But when I saw the caption on one of the posts, "The best host ever," it felt hollow. I texted Ben. "You're right. I should have invited you. I was scared you wouldn't get it, but I didn't give you the chance to prove me wrong. I'm sorry." He didn't reply right away. When he finally did, it was just a single message. "Next time, don't decide who I am for me." I'm still grappling with it. Was I wrong to prioritize the event's atmosphere over our friendship? Or was I right to trust my gut, knowing how easily Ben could have derailed the night? The party was perfect, but now, I wonder, at what cost? AITA? It was supposed to be a prank. A dumb, harmless prank. The kind of thing siblings do when they're bored, restless, and maybe a little too competitive for their own good. But now my sister Kat isn't speaking to me. My parents are furious, and the family heirloom, a literal priceless artifact, might be sitting in the bottom of the city's storm drain system. This all started with the dumb key. The key of eternal family unity, or whatever nonsense my dad calls it. It's this giant, ornate, medieval-looking key with a worn brass finish and engravings in some language no one in our family can actually read. My dad says it's been passed down for generations, from some great-great-great-granduncle who was probably a knight or something. The key doesn't do anything. It's too big and old to actually unlock anything, but my parents treat it like it's Excalibur. Every Christmas, my dad takes it out of its glass case, gives some speech about tradition and legacy, and then lets one of us hold it for a minute like it's the Olympic torch. Kat and I always roll our eyes and play along, but we've never really gotten the fuss. Last week, Dad went out of town for work, and Mom took the chance to deep clean the house. At some point, she asked me and Kat to dust the sacred artifacts. Yes, those were her actual words, which included polishing the stupid key. Kat and I were sitting on the living room floor, passing the thing back and forth like a hot potato, when she smirked. "Bet you couldn't hide this where I'd never find it," she said, spinning it in her hands. "Oh, please," I scoffed. "You'd crack in 5 minutes. Try me." And that's how it started. What was supposed to be a 10-minute game turned into an all-out war. First, I stuffed the key in a pile of laundry. Kat found it in 3 minutes. Then she slid it behind the fridge, but I spotted it when I went to grab a soda. We escalated from there. Under floorboards, inside a hollowed-out book, buried in the potted ficus. Finally, I got fed up. If she wanted a real challenge, I'd give her one. I grabbed the key, slipped on my sneakers, and bolted out the front door. "What are you doing?" Kat yelled, chasing after me. "You said never, right?" I shot back, grinning like a maniac. I ran 3 blocks to the nearest storm drain, the kind with the wide metal grates, and dangled the key over the edge. The streetlights reflected off the brass, and for a second, I felt like a cartoon villain holding some diabolical treasure. "You wouldn't," Kat said, stopping short, her eyes wide. "Watch me," I said. "It wasn't supposed to fall. I swear it wasn't. I was just trying to freak her out, get her to concede defeat." But then I shifted my grip, and the key slipped. There was this terrible, hollow clang as it hit the grate, bounced once, and disappeared into the darkness below. Kat screamed. I screamed. We both ran to the edge of the drain and peered down, but all we could see was a faint glint of metal in a puddle about 10 feet below. The key was gone. "Oh my God," Kat whispered, clutching her hair. "What did you do?" "It was an accident," I said, my voice high and panicked. "I didn't mean to. Dad is going to kill you." "No, we are in this together," I said quickly. "You dared me, remember?" She glared at me, her eyes narrowing. "I didn't dare you to drop it in the sewer." We spent the next 2 hours trying to fish it out with a coat hanger, a broomstick, and at one point, a sock tied to a string. Nothing worked. The key stayed stubbornly out of reach, mocking us from its watery grave. By the time we gave up, Kat was furious. She stormed back inside and locked herself in her room, leaving me to figure out how to explain this to our parents. I tried calling the city's public works department the next morning, but they told me they don't handle personal items in storm drains. When I asked if they could make an exception, the guy on the phone laughed and hung up. Now Dad's back, and the key's absence has been noticed. I tried to play dumb at first, but Kat cracked under the pressure and ratted me out. Dad hasn't said much, which is almost worse than if he'd yelled. He just keeps looking at me with this quiet, crushing disappointment. Mom, on the other hand, hasn't stopped ranting about irresponsibility and destroying our family's legacy. Apparently, the key is worth thousands of dollars, though no one's ever bothered to get it appraised. I feel terrible, but I also can't help thinking this whole situation is kind of ridiculous. It's a key. It doesn't even open anything. Kat says I'm downplaying it because I don't want to take responsibility, and maybe she's right. But part of me thinks my parents are the ones overreacting. I mean, who gets this upset over a useless hunk of brass? When my grandmother passed away, she left behind a lot of odd, precious things. A vintage sewing machine with a pedal that squeaked like an old door. A glass cabinet filled with porcelain figurines, their painted eyes just a little too lifelike. And, most famously, the teapot. Oh, the teapot. It was the crown jewel of her collection. big, ornate, and gilded. It looked like something plucked straight out of a fairy tale. The spout curled like a question mark, and the lid was topped with a tiny porcelain bird. It wasn't just decorative, though. Grandma actually used it. Every Sunday afternoon, she'd brew tea in that thing, and we'd sit around her table eating crumbly scones and listening to her stories about growing up in Ireland. She'd always say, "Tea tastes better when it's made in a proper pot." When she died, the teapot became something of a family relic. My mom inherited it, but she kept it locked in a glass case in her dining room, only bringing it out for big holidays like Christmas or Easter. I didn't think much of it, to be honest. It was just a teapot. A pretty one, sure, but nothing magical. That is, until last month, when I ruined everything. My best friend Eva was having a cottagecore dinner party, because of course she was. She wanted everything to be perfect: linen tablecloths, hand-picked wildflowers, a playlist of acoustic covers, and she asked me to bring something whimsical to add to the vibe. I don't know why I thought of the teapot. Maybe because Eva's obsessed with vintage aesthetics, or maybe because it felt nice to imagine something of Grandma's being part of the evening. Either way, the idea popped into my head, and once it was there, it wouldn't leave. So, the next time I was at my mom's house, I waited until she was busy in the kitchen and snuck into the dining room. The teapot was sitting in its case, pristine as ever. I hesitated for a second, but then I reminded myself, it was just for one night. I'd bring it back, no one would notice, and it would be fine. I was so wrong. The party itself was stunning. Eva had gone all out, turning her tiny backyard into a scene straight out of a storybook. We were drinking herbal tea under string lights when Eva noticed the teapot. "Oh my God," she gasped, her hands flying to her chest. "That's gorgeous." "Thanks," I said, feeling a swell of pride. It belonged to my grandmother. Everyone oohed and ah-ed, and for a moment, I felt like a hero. Eva even insisted on pouring the tea herself, making a little show of it. She held the teapot high, letting the liquid arc dramatically into our mismatched cups. And then it happened. Eva, in all her dramatic flair, overestimated her grip. The teapot slipped from her hands, and I swear the world went into slow motion. I lunged for it, but it was too late. It hit the table with a hollow thunk before crashing to the ground, shattering into what felt like a million pieces. The backyard went dead silent. Eva stared at the shards, her face pale. I'm so sorry," she stammered. "It slipped." "It's fine," I said automatically, even though it wasn't. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "It's just a teapot." But it wasn't just a teapot, and I knew it. So did my mom, who immediately noticed it was missing when I tried to sneak the pieces back into the house the next day. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice low and sharp. I tried to explain how it was just for one night, how I didn't mean for it to break, how I thought it would be fine. But she wasn't listening. She just kept looking at the broken pieces in my hands like I'd brought home a dead bird. "That was the last thing your grandmother gave me," she said, her voice cracking. "Do you even understand what you've taken from me?" I tried to apologize, but it didn't matter. She wouldn't hear it. Now, she won't even look at me, let alone talk to me. Every time I visit, the empty space in the glass case feels like a gaping wound. I feel awful, of course I do, but a part of me wonders if she's overreacting. It was an accident, and I didn't mean to hurt her. I just thought it would be nice to share a piece of grandma with my friends. So, AITA? Not the kind you order at 2 a.m. after a bad breakup, but the kind that makes you question reality. I'd picked up a shift for a coworker at the pizza joint where I worked. It was a quiet Tuesday, the kind of night where the only orders were from college students and the odd insomniac. Around 10:30, just as I was about to clock out, an order came in for the Works pizza with a note that read, "Deliver to 33 Elmwood. Leave it by the door and knock twice." No need for change. Elmwood was on the edge of town, past a stretch of warehouses and empty lots. Most people didn't even know there was a house there, but I was too tired to care. So I threw the pizza in the warmer bag and headed out. When I got to 33 Elmwood, I saw what looked like an abandoned house. It was dark except for a single light in the window. I knocked twice and left the pizza on the stoop, as instructed. But as I turned to go, The door creaked open behind me. "Wait!" a raspy voice called out. I froze. An old man, hunched and wearing an oversized sweater, shuffled into view. "You came," he said, like I'd done something extraordinary. His eyes were sharp, almost too sharp for someone so frail. Yeah, pizza delivery," I said, holding up the receipt like it was a shield. Good, he muttered. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, battered coin purse. He counted out some crumpled bills, then handed me something else, a gold coin the size of a poker chip. I stared at it. "What's this?" "Your tip," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It's worth far more than you think." Before I could respond, he closed the door, leaving me standing there like an idiot with a pizza bag and a piece of pirate treasure. When I got home, I tossed the coin on my dresser and forgot about it until the next morning. That's when I noticed something strange. The coin had changed. The once smooth surface now had faint writing on it, letters I couldn't decipher. Curious, I snapped a picture and uploaded it to a numismatics forum, asking if anyone recognized it. The replies came fast and frantic. "Where did you get this?" one person asked. "That's a Satoshi coin," another wrote. "There are only a few in existence. They're worth millions." Millions? I reread the comment 3 times. No way. This had to be a prank. But as I scrolled, more users chimed in with links, articles, and auction results. One coin had sold for $4.3 million last year, another for $5.2 million. I sat there, stunned, staring at the coin on my dresser. It couldn't be real, but if it was... Over the next few days, I had the coin appraised, and sure enough, it was authentic. Not just authentic, it was pristine, one of the rarest in existence. The appraiser couldn't stop shaking his head. "You've hit the jackpot, kid," he said, his eyes practically glowing. "You could auction this for millions." Millions. Just from delivering a pizza. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not even my roommate, Will, who would have spent the entire day dreaming up ridiculous schemes for how to spend the money. I needed time to think. What does someone even do with millions of dollars? It felt too big to process, like trying to drink the ocean through a straw. But secrets have a way of slipping out. I blame myself, really. I got too comfortable. One night, after a couple of beers, I let it slip to Will. He stared at me for a full 10 seconds, then burst out laughing. "You're messing with me," he said. "I'm not," I insisted. "I'm serious. The coin's legit." When he finally believed me, his reaction wasn't what I expected. He wasn't excited for me. He was calculating. "So what's the plan?" he asked, leaning forward like we were co-conspirators in a heist. "Plan for what?" "For sharing it," he said, like it was obvious. "I mean, come on. I've covered your rent a bunch of times. And remember that time I lent you money for your car repair? That was $50, I said, frowning. "Yeah, but still," he said, his grin tight. "We're in this together, right?" That's when I realized this wasn't going to be simple. Within a week, everyone seemed to know. Will couldn't keep his mouth shut, and soon my phone was blowing up. My cousin asked if I could help fund her new business. My coworker wanted a loan to get back on his feet. Even my mom, who I thought would be supportive, called with a laundry list of things I could finally fix for her. Her mortgage, her car, my sister's college tuition. The pressure was suffocating. Every conversation turned into an opportunity for someone to ask for money. At first, I tried to say yes. I gave my mom $100,000 to pay off her debts. I lent my cousin $20,000 for her business, even though I wasn't sure she'd ever pay it back. I handed Will $10,000 because I couldn't deal with his constant guilt trips. But no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. "You're keeping the rest for yourself?" my mom asked one night, her voice tight with disappointment. "I thought you'd do more for your family." "Mom, I gave you $100,000. I snapped. "What else do you want?" "It's not just about me," she said. "It's about what's fair. You have millions, Alex. Millions. Fair." That word echoed in my head like a curse. Everyone seemed to think they were entitled to a piece of the pie, like I was a walking ATM. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the constant anxiety, the way I'd started avoiding calls because I couldn't handle another request. The breaking point came when we threw a party at our apartment and invited half the neighborhood. I came home to find strangers drinking beer on my couch, talking about my coin like it was public property. Are you serious right now? I yelled, kicking everyone out. Will had the nerve to act offended. What's your problem? You're rich now. Lighten up. I looked at him, dumbfounded. This isn't your money, Will. You don't get to decide how I use it. You'd be nothing without me, he shot back. You'd still be broke, delivering pizzas, if I hadn't let you crash here. That was it. I moved out the next day, taking the coin with me. I haven't spoken to him since. Now, as I sit in a tiny studio apartment with no furniture and too many locks on the door, I can't help but wonder, was it worth it? I have the coin. I have the money. But I've lost so much more. Every year, my best friend Casey and I have a ritual. We plan one big road trip. We spread out maps, mark destinations with neon pins, and argue, playfully, at first, over the itinerary. It's tradition. And like most traditions, it's as much about nostalgia as it is about the thing itself. This year, the plan was ambitious. 3 states in 5 days, a whirlwind of roadside diners, scenic hikes, and quirky attractions. But the trouble began before we even left, with Casey's so-called shortcut. We were supposed to be heading to a sunflower farm about 2 hours away. I'd painstakingly mapped out a scenic route that wound through small towns and avoided highways. Casey had even agreed to it last week, but as I climbed into the passenger seat, she shoved her phone in my face. "Check this out," she said, grinning. "I found a faster way." I frowned at the screen. "That's just the interstate." "Yeah, but it cuts off 40 minutes, she said, buckling her seatbelt. "We'll have more time to chill at the farm." "But the whole point is to enjoy the drive," I said, clutching my printed map like it was the Constitution. "It's not about speed." She rolled her eyes. "You and your map fetish. This isn't the Oregon Trail, Sam. We have GPS now." I didn't laugh. We agreed on the scenic route. "And I'm saying, maybe the scenic route is overrated," she said, pulling out of the driveway. "We can still do all the fun stuff without wasting half the day looking at cows." "They're historic cows," I muttered. But she didn't hear me over the sound of her playlist blasting from the speakers. For the first half hour, I tried to let it go. I told myself it didn't matter, that the point was spending time together, not which road we took. But every time I looked at her phone's GPS, with its cold, efficient blue line cutting across the screen, my resentment simmered. Eventually, I couldn't hold it in. "This sucks," I said, crossing my arms. Casey glanced at me, confused. "What sucks?" "This. The highway. The traffic. The fact that you completely ignored the plan." She sighed. "It's just a route, Sam. Relax." "It's not just a route," I said, voice rising. "It's part of the experience. The journey. Remember? You're the one who always says that." "Yeah, but I don't mean taking the longest, most boring detour just to feel quirky." "Quirky?" I snapped. "It's not quirky to want to take the time to actually see things. You're acting like this is just a chore to check off." Her grip on the wheel tightened. "God, you're so dramatic. It's not that deep. I just didn't want to spend all day in the car, okay? Then why even bother going at all?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What's that supposed to mean?" "If you don't care about the trip itself, why not just stay home and watch Netflix? Why waste the gas?" "Are you serious right now?" she said, voice sharp. "You think I don't care? I'm the one driving. I'm the one who spent 3 hours finding us a great deal on that sunflower farm. And I'm the one who spent 3 hours mapping out a route you clearly couldn't care less about." "Jesus Christ, Sam," she muttered, shaking her head. "It's a road. Not everything has to be some grand, meaningful adventure." Her words felt like a slap. I stared out the window, blinking back angry tears. "Well, maybe it's not about the road. Maybe it's about the fact that you never stick to what we plan." "Oh, give me a break," she said, laughing bitterly. "You always do this. You get so attached to your perfect little ideas, and the second things don't go exactly your way, you lose it. At least I care about the details." "Yeah, because you're a control freak?" The words hit harder than I expected. like she'd been holding them back for a while. I felt my stomach twist. "Pull over," I said quietly. "What?" "Pull over. I'm done." "Sam, don't be ridiculous." I said, "Pull over." She swore under her breath but complied, steering the car onto the shoulder. Before she could say anything else, I unbuckled my seatbelt, grabbed my map, and got out. "Sam," she shouted after me, "what the hell are you doing?" "I'll find my own way," I said, waving the map like a flag of defiance. "You're being insane," she said, climbing out of the car. "It's a freaking road trip, not a breakup." "Maybe it should be," I shot back. "I'm tired of being the only one who cares." "That's not fair," she said, her voice shaking now. "You're acting like I don't try at all, like I don't love doing this with you. But sometimes it feels like you're more in love with your plans than you are with, I don't know, me." Her words hung in the air, heavy and raw. I froze, map clutched in my hand, my heart pounding. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. Finally, I sighed. "I just wanted it to be special." "It is special," she said, stepping closer. "But not because of the route or the cows or your stupid map. It's special because it's us." I stared at her, feeling my anger drain away, leaving only exhaustion and guilt. "I didn't mean to ruin it." "You didn't," she said softly. "But maybe we both need to let go of the idea that there's a right way to do this." I nodded, swallowing hard. "Okay, truce." "Truce," she said, smiling faintly. We got back in the car, and she let me pick the next route. It wasn't perfect, and we got a little lost, but the sunflowers were worth it. And so was she. It was supposed to be a celebration. My coworker Ben had just won some kind of award, excellence in innovation, or something equally vague, and the whole team had been invited to his house for a party. I wasn't particularly excited about going, but skipping these things makes you that guy at work. So I slapped on my nicest button-up and showed up, bottle of cheap wine in hand. Ben's house was annoyingly perfect. Vaulted ceilings, spotless hardwood floors, and just enough quirky art to say, I'm successful, but I still have personality. I couldn't help noticing the strategically placed copies of business books on his coffee table, the lean innovator and pivot like a pro. Of course, his wife was equally picture-perfect, floating around with a tray of hors d'oeuvres like she was auditioning for a reality show about wealthy overachievers. The night started off fine. I stayed close to the snack table, nodding and smiling through small talk about quarterly projections and office politics. But then Ben decided to give a speech, and that's when things started to go downhill. "I just want to thank everyone for coming," he said, holding up a glass of champagne. "This award isn't just about me, it's about all of us. The work we do as a team is what makes this possible." Everyone clapped and I joined in, though my hands were moving slower than my brain. I didn't want to be the only one not clapping, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Ben's whole humble leader act was about as authentic as a supermarket birthday cake. "Of course," Ben continued, his smile widening, "I couldn't have done this without my mentor, Carl. He taught me everything I know about leadership." My jaw clenched. Carl. The same Carl who had been my mentor, until Ben swooped in and became his favorite. Suddenly, I remembered all the times Carl had forgotten to invite me to strategy meetings or assign Ben the high-visibility projects. The memory made my wine taste bitter. As people started to mingle again, someone nudged me. It was Lisa, another coworker. "Pretty inspiring, huh?" she said, her eyes shining. "Inspiring," I repeated, the words sticking in my throat like a popcorn kernel. "I guess, if you're into that whole golden boy narrative." Lisa frowned. "What do you mean?" I shrugged, taking another sip of wine. "I mean, it's easy to shine when you're always handed the best opportunities. Some of us don't get that kind of spotlight." Lisa tilted her head, her expression shifting from confusion to discomfort. "Well, he does work hard." "I'm not saying he doesn't," I said quickly. "I'm just saying he's had a lot of help. Carl practically spoon-fed him those big projects. The rest of us were left to fend for ourselves." Lisa gave me a tight smile and drifted away, and I immediately felt a pang of regret. But it wasn't enough to stop me. The floodgates were open. Later, I found myself in a circle with Ben and a few others. They were talking about the award again, and I couldn't resist. Honestly, I said, interrupting someone mid-sentence, awards are nice, but they're not the only measure of success. Some of us are grinding behind the scenes, keeping everything running while others get the glory. The group went quiet. Ben blinked at me, his smile faltering. Well, I think everyone's contributions matter, he said carefully. It's just that this particular project... Sure, I said, cutting him off. But let's not pretend it's a level playing field. Not everyone gets the same resources or attention. Some of us have to work twice as hard just to get noticed. One of the others coughed awkwardly. Ben's wife, who had wandered over with a tray of mini quiches, gave me a look that could have withered a houseplant. Ben, to his credit, stayed calm. I appreciate that, he said, but I think it's also about making the most of the opportunities you do get. Right? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Because it's just that easy. The tension in the group was so thick you could have spread it on toast. Someone muttered an excuse and wandered off, and the others followed like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Soon it was just me and Ben, standing in awkward silence. Look, Ben said finally, his tone measured. I don't know what's bothering you, but if there's an issue, maybe we should talk about it at work. There's no issue, I said, though the tightness in my chest said otherwise. I'm just being honest. Not everyone has the same starting line, you know? Ben looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. You know, Sarah, sometimes it's not about starting lines. Sometimes it's just about letting people have their moment. He walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing there with my empty wine glass and a sinking feeling in my stomach. The rest of the night was a blur. I left before dessert, mumbling an excuse about an early morning. When I got home, I lay awake replaying the conversation in my head. I told myself I hadn't done anything wrong. I was just speaking the truth. But a small, nagging voice in the back of my mind kept whispering, was it the truth? Or was it just your ego? The next morning, I found an email from Lisa. It was short and to the point. Hey, just wanted to say that last night felt uncomfortable. I think you might owe Ben an apology. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. Did I owe him an apology? Or was everyone just too sensitive? I couldn't decide, but the question kept circling in my mind all day, refusing to settle. I didn't set out to ruin the neighborhood block party. In fact, I thought I was making it better. It's not like anyone told me, hey, maybe don't unleash a centuries-old curse for the sake of winning the chili cook-off. If they had, I probably would have thought twice. Probably. Let me explain. Every year, my street does this big block party, complete with food trucks, face painting, and the highly competitive Golden Ladle chili cook-off. Last year, I lost to Old Man Rick, whose chili is basically meat soup with a pound of salt. He won because he brings a harmonica and plays "Oh Susanna," while the judges eat, which everyone finds charming for reasons I cannot fathom. This year, I was determined to crush him. No gimmicks, no pandering. Just the best damn chili anyone had ever tasted. So, naturally, I went to the library. Look, I know what you're thinking. Libraries aren't exactly known for their chili expertise, but ours has this quirky, local legends section full of old recipes, folklore, and weird trivia. I thought, why not go vintage? Maybe find some ancient frontier chili recipe that'll blow everyone's minds. That's when I stumbled across the recipe book of Alistair Cragmore. The name sounded vaguely familiar, like something I'd heard in a ghost story as a kid, but I didn't think much of it. The book was old, leather-bound, and smelled faintly of ash. Inside, there was a chili recipe titled The Fire of Triumph. The instructions were written in this flowery, old-timey script, but the ingredients seemed normal enough. Meat, beans, spices, and a few secret touches like honey and cocoa powder. There was also a note at the bottom that said, best prepared during the waning moon under a clear sky. Weirdly specific, but fine. I wasn't about to let a full moon dictate my schedule. I checked out the book and got to work. The first red flag should have been the ingredient list. The spices had these ominous names like ashen pepper and widow's spice, but I figured they were just archaic terms for things we still use today. I googled substitutions and settled on smoked paprika and ghost pepper flakes. Yes, I see the irony now. The real kicker was the instruction to stir Widdershins 7 times. Widdershins, for those of you who don't spend your evenings reading cursed manuscripts, means counterclockwise. I thought it was charming, like something out of a fairy tale. The chili itself turned out incredible. Rich, smoky, with just the right amount of heat. I knew, deep in my soul, that it was the kind of chili that could dethrone Old Man Rick and his harmonica nonsense. Fast forward to the block party. I showed up with my slow cooker, garnished my chili with fresh cilantro and a dollop of sour cream, and set up my station between the bounce house and the lemonade stand. People were intrigued by my chili's dark, velvety color and the aroma that seemed to pull them in like a tractor beam. I even caught Old Man Rick sniffing the air, his harmonica dangling from his neck like a useless talisman. The judges came by for their first round of tasting. I watched as they took their bites, their faces shifting from mild curiosity to something bordering on awe. "What's in this?" one of them asked, her voice hushed like she was in church. "It's an old family recipe," I lied. "Secret spices." I was this close to victory. I could feel it. And then, it started. It began with the sky. One minute, it was clear and sunny, and the next, these dark clouds rolled in out of nowhere, swirling directly above the block party. A strong gust of wind knocked over the lemonade stand, sending cups flying. Kids started crying. Someone's folding chair flew into a hedge. "Is this in the forecast?" someone shouted. "It's probably just a weird weather front," I said, trying to keep things calm. That's when I noticed the chili. It was bubbling. Not like normal slow cooker bubbling. This was violent, frothy, angry. The smell changed, too, growing sharper and more pungent, like smoke and sulfur. I reached for the slow cooker lid, thinking maybe I'd burned it, but the moment I touched it, the chili let out a hiss. An actual, audible hiss. Maybe we should all back up," I said, but it was too late. The chili erupted like a mini volcano, spewing hot, reddish-brown liquid straight into the air. People screamed. The bounce house deflated in slow motion. Somewhere in the chaos, Old Man Rick yelled, "What the hell did you put in there?" And then we saw it, a figure emerging from the steam. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but no, it was real. A tall, shadowy man with glowing red eyes, wearing a tattered coat and a hat that looked like it belonged to the 1800s. "Who dares awaken me?" the figure boomed, his voice echoing across the block party. Everyone froze, except for my Aunt Linda, who whispered, "Is this part of the contest?" The shadowy figure pointed a long, skeletal finger directly at me. "You have summoned Alistair Cragmore," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "And now you must pay the price." "What price?" I stammered. "Your soul," he said. "Or perhaps a bowl of chili." I blinked. "Wait, what?" "I've been trapped in limbo for centuries," Alistair explained, his tone slightly less dramatic now. "You have no idea how much I've missed chili." "Oh," I said, scrambling to ladle some into a disposable bowl. Here you go." He took a cautious bite, then another. His glowing eyes dimmed slightly. This is actually very good." "Thank you," I said, unsure whether to feel flattered or terrified. By now, the block party crowd had gathered around, watching in stunned silence as Alistair Cragmore, centuries-dead chili enthusiast, finished the bowl. "You are spared," he announced, setting the empty bowl down. "But heed this warning. The recipe is not meant for mortal hands." "Noted," I said quickly. With that, he disappeared in a swirl of smoke, leaving behind the faint scent of cumin and regret. I didn't win the golden ladle. Old Man Rick did. Again. Apparently, summoning a cursed spirit is too dramatic for the judges. But you know what? At least no one will forget my chili. AITA for accidentally summoning a ghost over a cook-off? Or should the neighborhood be thanking me for spicing things up? It all began with the potluck, a simple, innocent, no-big-deal work potluck. The kind where someone always shows up with a store-bought veggie tray, another person forgets entirely, and at least one overachiever makes a dessert that looks like it belongs on a Food Network competition. Our office potlucks had a reputation for being mediocre, but this time, I was determined to raise the bar. I decided to make my world-famous lasagna. Not to brag, okay, maybe a little, but people lose their minds over my lasagna. It's not just layers of pasta. It's a labor of love. I use homemade sauce, 3 kinds of cheese, and the good sausage from that Italian deli across town. It's the kind of dish that makes people close their eyes and moan when they eat it. The problem? It's expensive. By the time I'd finished gathering ingredients, my grocery bill was $76.43. But hey, it was worth it for the glory. I envisioned my co-workers oohing and aahing, lifting me onto their shoulders as they chanted, "Lasagna Queen." The day of the potluck, I arrived early and set my masterpiece on the table. Almost immediately, people started buzzing about it. "Did you make that from scratch? Wow, that smells amazing." I played it cool, but inside, I was glowing. When it was time to eat, the lasagna was the star of the show. People went back for seconds and thirds. Even Brian, who usually acts like carbs are his mortal enemy, declared it the best thing he'd ever eaten. By the end of lunch, the tray was scraped clean. And then it happened. Lisa, our office gossip, sidled up to me, holding her plate. "Hey," she said, with her trademark smirk, "did you hear about the fund?" "The fund?" I asked, distracted as I packed up my now empty tray. "Yeah," she said. "We're all chipping in to reimburse people who brought stuff. Greg started it." Greg. Of course it was Greg. Greg's contribution to the potluck had been a sad loaf of French bread he clearly grabbed from the clearance rack on his way to work. Now he wanted reimbursements? I laughed. "Oh, I'm good. I don't need anything." Lisa tilted her head. "Are you sure? Everyone's chipping in $5 or $10. Greg said it'll help cover the big-ticket items." That gave me pause. If anyone had a big-ticket item, it was me. I spent nearly $80 on lasagna ingredients, while Greg spent $2.99 on stale bread. The idea of him getting reimbursed out of a communal fund made my blood boil. Still, I waved her off. "Nah, I'm fine." Later that afternoon, Greg emailed the office a spreadsheet. It listed everyone who'd contributed to the potluck fund, along with their expected reimbursement. My name wasn't on the contributor list, but Greg had assigned himself a reimbursement of $15. $15 for bread. Meanwhile, the column next to my name just said, "Not applicable." I saw red. I fired off a reply all email, "Hey everyone, just noticed that Greg is reimbursing himself $15 for bread, while my $76 lasagna is marked as not applicable. If we're dividing funds fairly, maybe contributions should reflect the actual effort and cost of what people brought." Just a thought. The email landed like a bomb. Half the office replied within minutes. "Lisa, OMG, I was wondering about that. Your lasagna was amazing. Definitely deserves a bigger reimbursement." Brian, "Wait, Greg gets $15 for bread? I'm chipping in for the lasagna." Greg, clearly panicking, replied, "This was just meant to be casual, guys. No need to make it a thing." It was officially a thing. By the end of the day, the potluck fund had grown to $150 because people started adding extra money specifically for me. Greg, now embarrassed, reduced his reimbursement to $5. Someone even made a joke about introducing a lasagna tax for future potlucks. But here's where it gets awkward. Greg cornered me the next morning in the break room. "I didn't mean to offend you," he said, his tone somewhere between apologetic and annoyed. "I thought you didn't care about the fund." "I didn't," I replied, "until I saw you giving yourself $15 for bread." "It's just a potluck," he said. "Why are you making this such a big deal?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Because my lasagna wasn't just lasagna, Greg. It was a gift to this office. Bread can't compare." He stormed off, muttering something about drama queens. Now, the office is divided. Some people think I was justified in calling out Greg's freeloading. Others think I overreacted, arguing that it was just a few bucks and not worth the tension. Meanwhile, Greg has been sulking at his desk all week, and Lisa keeps asking when I'm going to make lasagna again. AITA? The creature appeared on Mara's doorstep one rainy afternoon, sleek and black with eyes that glowed like embers. It wasn't unusual for stray cats to wander the neighborhood, but this one didn't behave like a stray. It sat perfectly still, its tail curled neatly around its feet, and stared at her door as though waiting for an invitation. When Mara opened the door, it looked up at her with a flicker of something that almost resembled amusement. "Sorry, little guy," she said, crouching to get a better look. "I don't have anything for you." The cat blinked slowly as if to say, "I'm not here for snacks." Then it turned and padded away, disappearing into the rain-soaked street. She didn't think much of it until the following morning, when she found a small, intricately folded piece of parchment on her doorstep. Unfolding it, she found 3 words written in a spidery, elegant hand. "Feed the cat." Mara frowned. It had to be a prank. Who left cryptic notes about cats? She crumpled the paper, tossed it into the trash, and went about her day. But that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the cat returned. It sat in the exact same spot as before, watching her door. This time, it carried something in its mouth, a small bundle wrapped in fabric. Curiosity got the better of her. She opened the door and crouched again. "What have you got there?" The cat dropped the bundle at her feet and meowed softly. Mara hesitated, then picked it up. The fabric was damp and cold, and when she unwrapped it, she found a single key. It wasn't an ordinary key. It was long and slender, made of dark metal that shimmered like oil. Its bow was shaped like a crescent moon, and along the shaft, tiny runes glowed faintly. "What is this?" she murmured, but the cat simply stared at her. She stood, clutching the key, and looked around. "Whose key is this? Where did you get it?" The cat blinked, turned, and walked away again. Mara spent the next hour pacing her kitchen, the key lying on the table like an accusation. She wanted to ignore it, to pretend it was just some bizarre coincidence, but a part of her, some deep, buried instinct, knew better. Finally, she decided to follow the cat. The next evening, she left a saucer of milk by the door. Sure enough, as the sun set, the cat appeared. It sniffed the milk briefly before looking up at her, its eyes glowing brighter than ever. Then it turned and began to walk away. Mara grabbed her coat and followed. The cat led her through the neighborhood, down streets she recognized and alleys she didn't. The further they went, the stranger the surroundings became. Streetlights flickered, their warm glow replaced by a cold, bluish hue. The air grew heavier, the sounds of the city fading into an eerie stillness. Finally, they reached an iron gate hidden behind a tangle of vines. The cat stopped and looked back at her, as if to say, "Well, go on." Mara hesitated. The gate was massive, its bars twisted into patterns that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. In the center of the gate was a keyhole, and Mara knew with a certainty that made her stomach churn, that the key in her pocket would fit. "All right," she muttered, taking a deep breath. "Let's see where this goes." She slid the key into the lock and turned it. The gate creaked open, revealing a narrow path that wound through a dark, misty forest. The trees were impossibly tall, their branches weaving together to form a canopy that blocked out the sky. The air was thick with the scent of moss and something faintly metallic. The cat darted ahead, its black form blending almost seamlessly with the shadows. "Wait," Mara called, but her voice sounded muffled, as though the forest were swallowing the sound. She followed, her steps hesitant but determined. The path led her to a clearing where an ancient stone archway stood. Its surface was carved with the same runes that had been etched into the key, and within the archway was a swirling, silver mist. The cat sat beside the arch, licking its paw as if none of this were unusual. "What is this place?" Mara asked, her voice trembling. The cat stopped licking and looked at her. This time, when it blinked, she heard a voice in her mind. "The threshold." The threshold of what? The cat's eyes narrowed. The threshold of what comes next. The mist within the archway began to shift, forming vague shapes. Cities that seemed to defy gravity, oceans that shimmered with unearthly light, creatures with too many eyes and too many teeth. "You must choose," the voice said. "Step through and leave this world behind, or stay and never know what lies beyond." Mara's pulse quickened. The thought of leaving everything she knew terrified her, but the images in the mist called to her, tugging at something deep and restless inside her. "What happens if I step through?" she asked. The The cat's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You'll find what you've always been looking for." "And if I don't?" The cat stood and stretched, its tail flicking lazily. "Then you'll spend the rest of your days wondering what might have been." Mara stared at the archway, her mind racing. The mist swirled, forming shapes that felt both alien and familiar. She thought of the life she'd been living, the monotony, the unshakable feeling that something was missing. She took a step forward. The mist reached out to meet her, wrapping around her like a cool breeze. She felt weightless, untethered, as though the ground had fallen away beneath her. The last thing she saw before stepping through was the cat, its eyes glowing brighter than ever. And then she was gone. The gate creaked shut behind her, and the cat sat once more, waiting for the next traveler.